The Oathbreaker's Daughter, The Dragon Knight Trilogy, Book 1, The Dragon Knights of Nerea. Written by Martin Paris. Narrated by Brittney LaBelle. Dedication. I dedicate this novel to my wife, who, when I said I would be writing a young woman main character, said, "Well, good luck with that." Prologue. The Arrest of Jenna's Father. Jenna sat in her father's lap for a time as he rocked her tenderly in the wooden chair he had made over the summer. He stared into the fire, his arms wrapped around her, while she laid her head against his chest, listening to the beat of his heart. He still smelled like boiled leather, like his armor, but it didn't bother her at all. In fact, Jenna had come to enjoy the smell, so attached to him as it was in her mind. He was a giant to her, as all fathers did to their little girls when they were small, with straight brown hair that curled as it grew longer, a brown that matched his trim mustache and goatee. They needed the crackling blaze in the hearth to keep away the chill of late autumn. Northern Abrea grew colder faster than the rest of the nation, being so close to Idal, but it meant more to Jenna than warmth. She never understood why at her young age, but her father only came home to them after dark, and in the spring and summer months, the days were long. The shortness of daylight in autumn and winter meant she would have more time with her father, even if only a few more hours. Her mother glided into the room, as she always seemed to when father was around. She was a young woman, thin and graceful, a beauty that could have married any man in any of Abrea's villages or towns. Luxuriously soft brown hair with a hint of curl framed her lovely face, and set off the slight traces of green that tinged the inner ring of her brown irises. "I think it's about time for bed, Jenna," she said, her voice almost inaudible over the fire. Jenna almost imperceptibly tightened herself in her father's lap, to which he replied, "A few more minutes yet." She savored those minutes, allowed her father's embrace to wash over her, a shield of warmth and love that protected her from the marauding, brutish warriors of Volgesh, the wolf packs and polar bears of Idal, or even the vile assassins and necromancers of Rakrud. Jenna knew he would always be there for both her and her mother, defending them and Abrea with a bow, steel, and his dragon. Though King Rendor ruled, her father was the true king in the eyes of his 5-year-old daughter. After some time, his embrace slacked, and he whispered into her ear, "Off to bed now." She mumbled something, really nothing more than a wordless moan as she wrapped her arms around his muscled torso. Jenna never wanted to let go. She knew he would be gone when she awoke with the sunrise. Sometimes she would try to stay awake all night, to catch one last glimpse of him, say one more goodbye before he left. But those nights she seemed to fall asleep even faster. She resolved herself to rising earlier, because sometimes she awoke before the sun, but those times he had either already left or still slept next to mother. She would always fall back to sleep before he awoke. "No more of that, little dear," he said as he stood, the small girl still in his arms. She felt the power of his body, the strength as he did so. He was a warrior, a dragon knight, a man who spent his entire life training and fighting. He carried his most delicate possession across the small den toward her bedroom, and Jenna twisted a bit to rest her head over his right shoulder. Her eyes scanned the room, stopping briefly on her mother, who blew her a kiss goodnight, but then moved to the door of their home, or rather the items next to the door. A heap of blackened boiled leather armor sat there, a quiver full of arrows leaning casually against it. A steel longsword gleamed unevenly in the firelight, its smoky black-hued steel betraying its origins in the forges of Volgesh, from where came the best steel in all the world. Last was the longbow. Taller than some men, Jenna knew her father could end an enemy from hundreds of yards away with a single arrow. All of Abrea's dragon knights, including King Rendor himself, carried bows crafted from the great tree. This one carried etchings and reliefs of wood nymphs, pixies, and a dragon, all caught in mid-flight. The bow passed from her sight as he carried her into her darkened room. Jenna felt the snoring of the huge green beast behind her home. He arranged himself in a ball not unlike a common cat, with his enormous triangular head resting on folded paws. Just a few weeks ago, Father introduced her to the dragon, and she reached out and laid a tiny hand on one of its hooked claws. A claw that was the same size as her entire body. She gazed into its eyes as it regarded her, and where other people sensed fear at the creatures that could crush someone with a mere step, or eviscerate a foe with one swipe of those massive claws, she saw only a deep wisdom and the love of the forest. "What's his name?" she had asked. "I call him Titan." Jenna cocked her head a bit, her brow knitted in some confusion, and replied, "That's what you call him, but what's his name?" Father hadn't understood the question, and she didn't understand why. He lovingly laid her down on her bed of skins and woolen blankets, but she wrapped her arms and hands tighter around his body when he tried to pull away. Other children saw their fathers every day, for hours and hours, to the extent that both tired of each other's presence, although children of Jenna's age rarely recognized such. Jenna was lucky to see him more than a few hours once per week, and she loathed letting him go, for she knew she wouldn't see him again for days at least, and days or a week felt much like an eternity to Jenna. "Don't go," she implored. He shushed her softly as he extricated himself from her embrace and pulled a blanket up over her body. She worked her arms out of the blanket and clasped her hands across her stomach. "I have to, little dear, but I'll be back again to see you soon," he replied, caressing her cheek with a thumb. He had a kind face, free from scars of battle, with slight lines of sadness around his eyes and mouth, the latter of which he tried to cover with his dark brown goatee. But Jenna could always see the sorrow in the deep brown of his eyes, though she didn't understand the cause. "When?" "Just a few days," he promised, and he leaned over to press his lips to her forehead. He left the room, pulling the door shut behind him, and Jenna stared at the ceiling and listened to the dragon. Its breath came and went like some smith's giant bellows, and it seemed to shake their small home each time it exhaled. Still, she found it somehow soothing. Other children had their mother's lullabies, but she had the comforting snores of a dragon. Even still, she threw back the blankets and leapt out of bed. She padded over to her door, her bare feet making no sound on the animal skin that carpeted her floor, and she gradually eased the door open a crack. Soft orange light from the dying fire spilled through that crack, and she put one eye to it to see her parents. Jenna saw them in an embrace, kissing. She opened her mouth and stuck her tongue out in revulsion, stifling the bleh sound that often accompanied such a reaction, and then returned to bed. She had just begun to dream when a far-off thumping sound disrupted her sleep, some image in her mind fading as she was pulled back to consciousness. The thumping grew more insistent, and she recognized it as someone pounding on the outside door of her home. There were shouted words also, and they sounded angry, but Jenna still wasn't awake enough to decipher them. The splintering cracks of wood, sudden like a crash of lightning, caused her to gasp and bolt upright in bed as someone burst in the door. Again she jumped from her bed and rushed to the door, opening it just enough to see. A light from the fireplace was all but gone, but there were 5 or 6 men in her home. All wore armor and were armed with swords, and several carried torches that flickered smokily. Her father wore his breeches and no tunic, unarmed, while her mother lay on the floor with nothing but a blanket wrapped around her, her dark hair spilling about her shoulders. Something was wrong with the dragon. He no longer slept, but instead stomped in the open yard behind the house. It seemed almost nervous, like that of a deer when it knew a predator was about, or perhaps a spooked horse. He shook the house with each impact of his immense paws on the ground as they lifted and fell in an uneven staccato. She understood how he felt. Something bad was happening, and he didn't know what to do.
"By order of King Rendor, I place you under arrest, Sir Timber,"
gruffly said one of the men, drawing Jenna's attention back to the scene beyond her room. "No!" her mother screamed. She climbed to her feet and almost lost her meager covering in so doing. "He's done nothing wrong!"
"You're charged with breaking your oath, betraying both your king and the Brotherhood."
Jenna opened the door a few more inches so she could see the speaker. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dirty blonde hair and a clean-shaven face. His black leather armor seemed more intricate than the others, with brass rings inserted all over it and sigils signifying his place. Her eyes widened when she realized that he too was a dragon knight, perhaps of the first circle, and slung across his back was a longbow not unlike her father's.
"You can't!"
Mother shouted. Jenna agreed. They couldn't take him. He was a good man, and he loved her. They had no right. Why didn't he do something? He was a warrior, a dragon knight. He could fight them. He would fight them. Why didn't he have Titan save him? Tim, sighed the other dragon knight as he cast his eyes downward. He brought them up to her father's face and added, You're my friend. Please, don't make this any more difficult. You know what you've done. Jenna's father almost shrank before her eyes. If he had any thought to fight or even argue, all his resolution had fled, almost as if he agreed with the accusation, as if he knew any resistance was pointless. It would only endanger those he loved. He had done his best to protect them, to make sure no one in the order, not his king, his commander, or his friends, knew of his wife and child, but deep down within his heart he had known it would only be a matter of time. His final act of protection would be to go to his fate without endangering them. He stepped forward. No! You can't! Jenna's mother again shouted, but this time at her husband instead of the armed men in her home. He turned to face her, and in contrast to her raised voice, he whispered, I must. We both knew this day may come. I only wish we'd had more time. Father kissed her mother then, but Jenna didn't turn away as she had before. Tears began to track down her face, though she still couldn't comprehend the scene entirely. Mother cried. Father looked like he wanted to. Come, Tim, said the blond man, and after a long moment her father broke away from the embrace. He turned slowly and headed for the door leaving the house, the men enveloping him as an escort as he neared the door. Realization struck Jenna, and she swung her bedroom door open. It banged into the wall with a sharp report, and she burst forth with all the fury of the summer storms. She shouted at the men, He's my father! You can't take him! Daddy, don't let them! Don't go! Of the men who had come to arrest her father, only one was a dragon knight, and the others appeared to be plain soldiers of Abrea's armies, those who likely knew what it was to be a father. Several of these men shifted indecisively at Jenna's attack, looking at the little girl, then their leader, and then at last to Sir Timber himself for some sort of guidance or support against the onslaught. Their relief was palpable when he turned and knelt before her. He put a palm on each of her cheeks and used his thumbs to wipe away her running tears. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead as he had done before, as he always did when saying goodbye, before pulling back to just look at her. His brown eyes reflected calm serenity, and she realized she no longer endured the agitated thumping of the dragon outside. She could see the many things he wanted to say, but after the space of a few breaths, he seemed to settle on, I love you, little dear. Jenna broke into sobs then and somehow eked out, I love you too, Daddy. She didn't know how long he held her in an embrace, only that too soon he was gone. Whooshes of air sounded from outside, a familiar sound as not one but two dragons lifted from the ground. Jenna and her mother held each other through the night and well past dawn, sharing their sorrow. Her father's longsword lay next to his armor where it had clanged to the floor amidst the forced entry of his captors. Later, Jenna realized that the blonde dragon knight had taken her father's longbow as he left the house.